Hi class, we're moving on to our next module, which is about global news under stress. This is actually probably the shortest chapter in your textbook, but at the same time it's one of the most important. The reason why it's short, it's not that there is not enough material to talk about. It is probably because everything is so new and everything is so fresh that it's actually a lot of issues that we can discuss, but they are still sort of under construction. And whatever is going on in the media nowadays sets trends for the future, but nobody really knows what these trends will be in the end. Well, let me give you an example of what I mean. Can you believe it? I'm probably dating myself a little bit, but when I started in the media, we were still using typewriters. And that's how I learned to write and to type. It's a very valuable skill, which you could not use actually on a touch screen nowadays. Then in mid 90s, I remember very vividly when I was in the newsroom at the Dallas Morning News in Dallas, and the newspaper had just set up its website. They had only one modem to connect to the internet in the newsroom, and it was right in the middle of the newsroom. So imagine this big, fairly quiet newsroom, and then the dial-up modem that would just do this noises, and everybody would be looking at me. What's wrong with you? What are you going on to the internet for? I mean, internet was a place to play. It was not a place to gather news. It was definitely not a place to disseminate news yet. And this was only 20 years ago. Can you imagine your life? Can you imagine news gathering? Can you imagine anything without the internet nowadays? The very model of news gathering and news dissemination has changed so dramatically in the past 20 years that it's completely mind-boggling when you think about it. But forget even the last 20 years. Think about the last 10 years with the advent of the social media. YouTube, that's about 2004, 2005. Facebook, 2006 to 2007, when it became power to reckon with. Twitter is even more recent. Vine, Snapchat, Instagram, you name it. When the movie about Facebook called Social Network came out, if you remember, there was line at the end of the movie that said Facebook now has 600 million users. Well, guess what? Now it has 1.7 billion users, and it has become such an important tool of news gathering, news dissemination, and so on. All those are very new processes, very new trends, and they have disrupted how global news flow in some major ways. In 1981, when you had CNN starting, at about the same time you had ESPN starting, at about the same time you had MTV starting, all these 24/7 channels dedicated to respectively news, sports, and music. And the naysayers were saying, oh, who would want to have access 24/7 to news, sports, or music? And suddenly these channels became exceptionally successful, but nowadays they're almost obsolete. They're trying to find relevance in the new age when not only you're at the mercy of some network or some media outlet giving you news 24/7, you actually have control over how to access this news and what to get, when to get it, how to get it, how much of it to get it, or maybe not get any of it at all. This has changed the models that traditional media operate. I mean, think about how newspapers were exceptionally profitable in, I would say, mid-90s. A good newspaper would make probably anywhere between 15 and 20% profit. And now newspapers are shutting down, they're laying off staff. They've lost 30% of their staff in the past 5 years or so. They cannot sustain the model that was normal for them for basically a few hundred years ago, paying for news by selling advertising. Another very important development is that nowadays also the bar for entrance into the media world, so to speak, is relatively low. Everybody, anybody, essentially can be a publisher. You can start a website, you can start a blog, you can be on Facebook and publish something, an opinion, a statement, a post of some kind, and suddenly have thousands of people respond to you and read you, just like before you had this privilege only afforded to actual media or traditional media, when you had some editor or producer had to approve you, put you on the air, or put you in the paper. Nowadays everybody is in a way a journalist. And this also has caused a lot of disruption, because then the amount of information is staggering, it's overwhelming sometimes, but also falsehoods, conspiracy theories, lies, all kinds of memes have multiplied in ways that were absolutely inconceivable before. Is this good or bad? I mean, I would say that it's both good and bad, and I'm actually asking you to think about the issue of who is a journalist today, and how we define media, how we define this profession, and what does it mean for all of us. When I came back to active journalism, even though I was already in the academia, but I decided to come back as a columnist, basically a weekly columnist, a regular writer of opinionating on certain current events. The very first thing that shocked me was the amount of comments that I was getting, because before that, I would write something very influential, perhaps we might have letters to the editor, we might have people come to the newsroom who would want to talk to me, meet me, and so on. But there was control over that. A letter would get in the mail, and then the newspaper might decide to publish it or not. When I started writing as a columnist again in 2006, 2007, suddenly you had all these people commenting under your articles, and you'd have 200 comments, and of them, I don't know, 190 would be completely insane, saying something that I would vehemently disagree with, or taking my words out of context, or some of them would go into ad hominems, into some kind of insults. I mean, you know this very well. But I try to argue and reason with most of them, which is a completely futile operation, and eventually I just gave up. And you know what's happening right now. For instance, National Public Radio has shut down its comment section completely because it has become so much out of hand. So in a way, that's also part of this great disruption caused by the digitalization of media, caused by the internet, caused by the social media, caused by all the changes that have been introduced by the new technologies. I have this funny mug here that says, "Please do not confuse your Google search with my journalism degree." Actually, they make it for various degrees, for instance, for history degree, and I think a bunch of others. But what it means is that professionalism still counts, and just because you have all this information that you can access fairly easily nowadays via Google, you can go to Wikipedia, you can go to various online sources, including some very solid academic research databases, does not mean that your brains are not functioning suddenly, that you have been replaced by robots, you still have to process this information. You still have to make sense of this information. You still have to be able to separate the good information, solid information, facts from opinion, and so on and so on and so on. One of the purposes of this class, and of pretty much any class that I teach, is that I try to teach my students, or try to help my students process the huge amount of information that they're exposed to nowadays, and assist them in finding some tools and approaches that help to overcome this digital disruption, helps them navigate the vast landscape of media that we have, and make sense of things.